In this parable that Christ gives about the rich man and Lazarus, one thing that we can be aware of is the fact that even if you're poor, you can still go to hell. And even if you're rich, you can still go to heaven. It's not about how much money we have, but what we do with the riches that are given to us. And Jesus, always remember, whenever the teachings of the last times come up, Jesus spoke about the eternal judgment more than anybody else in the New Testament. And every time he brings up what happens after life, he'll always separate between eternal heaven and the eternal separation from God in hell. And so our teachings on that come straight from Christ himself. So the question that we should always have in our hearts is, well, how can I get to heaven? And usually on autopilot within ourselves, I think they did a study to ask different people just randomly on streets. They asked them two questions. Do you think that Mother Teresa is in heaven? And do you think that you'll go to heaven? The interesting thing was the higher percentage of people, they would think it was like 90-some% said, I believe in heaven and I think I'm going there. And only like 50% said they think that Mother Teresa is there. So we're very good at rationalizing our own life, our own state of affairs, to believe that we're exactly where we should be to get to heaven. But one thing that really struck me in this reading is, where would I place myself? Would I place myself in the rich man's place or in the side of Lazarus? And I think the safest bet that we could ever have for our eternal salvation and to live life correctly on earth is to always see myself as a poor man, to always live in the vision of myself as Lazarus, as poor, hungry, outcast, and longing for a scrap of bread from anybody who would give it. If I believe in myself and my own poverty, I'll always be hungry for God. And so you can almost see in the image of this parable that Christ gives, it's that the church itself is that home, and Jesus himself is the rich man who comes from heaven, who descends to earth to find us who, in humanity, who were fallen and broken and had no hope. And he's the one that comes to bring us home, to bring us into the church where we all have a shelter, in the church where we all find a purpose, in the church where we all find a pathway to heaven, where we are all nourished from the altar with his own body and blood, soul and divinity. If I live with the knowledge, with the belief that I am the one who is always poor, always in need of God's mercy, then I'll always be receptive to that time when I need it and when Christ is offering it. As one priest said this one time at a homily, and I'll never forget it. It was a daily homily, just like this one. And he said, do you know why all of you are here right now? It's because of your suffering. Thank God for what you have suffered in your life. Because if you weren't suffering, you wouldn't need to come to church to beg God for his grace, to thank him for his presence. If you weren't hungering for God because you felt your emptiness in this world, you would not be here on a weekday. So the more that we recognize ourselves in the place of Lazarus as needing God's presence, needing the riches that he himself alone can give us, then we'll always be coming back to the church to receive our fill. Our goal in life is to remain poor. And if we remain poor, and we understand that in this desert, because this world is a desert, that's why the Psalm and Jeremiah are connected. Blessed is the man who remains with the Lord, his trust in the Lord. He remains like a tree planted near a stream of living water. All the riches of this world are like mirages that you can see out in the distant desert. And so many people run after it thinking that they'll find the fulfillment there. And that's when we begin to dry up. The secret to surviving in the desert life of this world is to always stay near the stream of living water that flows from the presence of Christ. Always come back to Christ. And to do that, we need to recognize every single day my thirst and my emptiness and my poverty. And that it's Jesus Christ alone, the Son of God, who comes from heaven to be with us here, who can satiate my deepest longings on earth and bring me to heaven for all eternity with him at the end of my life.